In my own mind, thanks to a failure to correctly do year-to-year time comparison, I was doing awesome. Maybe Han Solo was right. Sometimes it's better to not know the odds.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race. Hottie here, along with Fatty, bringing you the show that answers your questions, gives you training tips, details that course, and tells the stories about the highest and hardest one-day mountain bike race in America, the Leadville Trail 100 mountain bike race. This episode is presented by The Feed. You know, one of the most important parts of having a great Leadville 100 is training the way you plan to race, and that's definitely true with your nutrition. TheFeed.com is a great way to get and train with whatever you're going to eat on race day. The Feed has an incredible variety, great recommendations, and training advice from their staff. They have fast shipping, great pricing. Fatty swears by The Feed, using them to get a supply of pre-ride bonk breaker bars, GU Roctane gels, and that secret drink mix, the Martin's Race drink mix. But whether you choose to follow Fatty's lead for your nutrition or have your own food strategy, chances are you can find what you need at The Feed. Check them out, thefeed.com. If you subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts, and we hope you will, you'll notice that along with our weekly Season 1 show, we are releasing a half dozen Season 0 shows, binge style. They're coming out all at once here. And unlike our regular show, these Season 0 shows are one-topic Leadville race stories. They're Fatty's recountings of some of his favorite races about the 21 times he started the Leadville Trail 100. Listen to one when you want a little inspiration, or binge listen. Listen to all of them at once when you're on a long ride. This is Fatty's story here about his fastest Leadville ever. Ironically, this may be the longest story he's ever told about Leadville. Back when it appeared in text form, Fatty wrote it in 7 parts. So fair warning, you might want to save this one for while you're on a longish ride. Okay, Fatty, all yours.
I was at the starting line for the 2015 Leadville 100, my 19th start, although with any luck it would be my 18th finish, and I was wigging out more than usual, I mean. To illustrate, I was at this moment actually at the starting line for the race the second time. The first time 15 minutes ago I had arrived with a hammer. Then, arriving as she serenely walked toward the corral, I abruptly turned around and rode back to our house to use the bathroom just one more time. I was nervous. I had my reasons. Okay, you're standing here now, just like you knew you'd be, and all those moments when you thought you'd lose the weight you needed to later didn't exactly pan out, did they? I told myself. You're about 7 or 10 pounds heavier than you've been the last several years. You know, about 7 or 10 pounds heavier than you've ever been since you started finishing this race under 9 hours. And it was true. I am heavier than I'd like to be, and I knew that this isn't the kind of race where extra weight doesn't matter. It's more than 11,000 feet of climbing, after all, most of which happens at 10,000 feet and above, sometimes way above. So I'm heavy, I argued, but I'm also really strong this year. The work I've done with Trainer Road has made a big difference. I can feel it. I was the fastest I've ever been at the Rockwell Relay. I was the fastest I've ever been at the Crusher and the Tusher. I was fast enough in the Cedar City Fire Road 100 that I got moved to this starting corral almost all the way at the front. That counts for something, right? I asked myself. So why couldn't I accept that weight notwithstanding I had pretty good chances at hitting my objective? Oh, that objective. Sub 8 hours to do Leadville. I had said it out loud, had written it down and published it. You're an idiot, I told myself. You didn't get under 9 hours till your 15th try, and now you think you can be 19 minutes faster than your best? A best which, by the way, you've not repeated in 4 years, when you were in your mid-40s instead of in your very, very, very late 40s. But I haven't told people about that goal in a while, I said. I'll bet most people have forgotten it. Lately, I've been saying that my objective is to beat my best time, with a stretch goal of beating Rebecca Rusch's time in her first Leadville 100, 8 hours, 14 minutes, 53 seconds. I think that might be doable. Why did I want to beat Rebecca Rusch's 09 winning time? Because I thought it might be a useful data point to have the next time she refers to me as one of the not-so-fast people in the race. I tried to put all the nervousness out of my head. I failed. The gun went off. It was time to put my stress and my jitters behind me. Once again, the future had become the present. I clipped in and took off. And I found out that the difference between starting from the front of the line of 1,600 people and starting from the middle-ish part of a line of 1,600 people is incredible. I know, it's obvious. I expected it to be easier, faster, less congested, but I had no idea how much easier and faster and less congested it would be. Usually, as soon as I've got a little bit of momentum, I have to brake hard because the 200 racers ahead of me have slowed and geared down to go up the first little rise. But not this year. This year, the only people ahead of me were pros and might as well be pros. They didn't slow down, so I didn't have to shrug off speed. Usually, there are screeching brakes all around me as I round the first right turn after the school, but not this year. This year, racers hadn't had enough time to bunch up around me, so I had a free and clear line as I made that corner. Usually, racers who feel their best chance for winning this race is to jockey around racers the whole way down the pavement, risking tangled handlebars every second in order to gain a tenth of a second advantage on the course. This year, I was ahead of all that. The pros were ahead of me, the near pros were all around me, and we were just zooming down the pavement, neat and orderly as you please. For the first time in my Leadville 100 racing life, I didn't heave a massive sigh of relief when I reached the bottom of the paved descent and turned onto dirt. It had gone comfortably, perfectly, and safely. For that moment alone, the work I'd put into the Cedar City Fire Road 100 qualifying event had been worth it, and Strava bears it out. In this section, I had set a personal best, getting to the bottom of St. Kevin's 1 minute, 24 seconds faster than I had ever done before. That's a lot of time to earn in the first 15 minutes of a race. In real life, I am nothing if not deferential to those in a hurry. I'll make way for people to get in front of me in traffic. I'll open doors for people. I'll yield my place in the grocery line. If they're in a hurry, why not help them get where they're going in a hurry too? When I'm racing, my philosophy shifts somewhat. I become the one in the hurry, the one who wants to get around people. I'm careful not to be rude about it, at least my race brain doesn't perceive me as rude, but I am vocal, asking for people to move, to yield their line, to let me by. But I didn't have to do that at all this year. Starting from where I was already as far forward as I needed to be. I didn't need or even want to get around these racers. They were working their way up the mountain as fast as I wanted to go. So I found a good wheel to follow, settled in, and rode along. No need to expend energy by moving into a bad line and accelerating past someone. The paradox struck me. Up near the front of the race, it was both easier and faster. I hit the sharp turn at St. Kevin's in a new best time, 27 minutes, 31 seconds, and remembered when Reba and I had told people about during our webinars. Once you hit this turn, the trail continues steeply for one last short pitch, and then you've got a great opportunity to eat. I took my own advice and grabbed out my first GU Roctane gel of the day. I won't keep mentioning this, but let me say right now, I was absolutely fanatically disciplined about eating a GU Roctane gel every half hour of this race. I never made exceptions, except to perhaps sometimes eat one or two or 3 minutes early or late based on where I was in the course. I washed the GU down with a swig of half-strength Carbo Rocket 333. I'm perfectly fine with mixing nutrition brands, which is what I'd keep in the bottle the whole day. The other bottle would be water. And for the record, I never ever felt any stomach discomfort the entire day. Folks, I have gotten the eating part of this race nailed. Once you make that hard left turn at St. Kevin's, you've really gotten the first hard climb behind you. A few more miles of rolling riding in forested double track and dirt road pops you out onto the Carter's Summit pavement, descending for 3 miles in about 5 minutes. I marveled at how I've changed as a rider since 1997 when this section really scared me with how fast and steep it is. Now, I just crouched low and rode to the bottom. No drama, no sense of riding on the edge. Part of it's me. 20-ish years of cycling experience evidently counts for something. But a lot of it is how good modern bikes are. Big wheels, low-pressure tubeless tubes, amazing frames and components. The cycling world has seen so much change for the good since I started this sport. After the 3 miles of descending, a 1.5-mile gentle uphill gave me a chance to sit up and drink. Then I was on Hagerman's, a wide, graded, though often washboarded slightly uphill road that gives you one of the very best places in the course to work together. I got lucky right away. The cyclist 50 feet ahead of me looked back, saw I was near, and sat up for a moment for me to catch up. "Let's go get the next group," I said. "For sure. Let's go get the next big group," he said. For sure, I replied. "Yeah," I really said for sure. Immediately, I thought to myself, what? Why did I just say for sure? Am I Frank Zappa? Am I singing Valley Girl? That is the dumbest thing I've ever said. Sometimes I can be a little self-critical. This guy didn't comment, however. He was a champ at working together. 15-second pull, peel left, drop back and rest, repeat. Soon we had caught Brandon Smith, whom I honestly had not expected to see this day. Brandon had kicked my corn at the Cedar City Fire Road 100. I assumed he'd be miles ahead of me by now. "Jump on, Banks," I said, getting his last name wrong. Then, remembering Brandon Banks is a different local rider, I said, "Damn it, I just got your last name wrong, didn't I?" "Doesn't matter," he said. Well, I noted that in the past 2 minutes, I had said 2 dumb things aloud, and that I'd probably be best off keeping my mouth shut. Figuratively, not literally, since I needed to keep my mouth wide open to get enough air while doing this race. We caught group after group, growing our line, till as we reached the sharp left turn that signaled the Sugarloaf climb, we were a dozen strong. Which would mean nothing at all now that we were heading up one of the rockiest parts of the race. The time for pace lines was, for the time being, over. Brandon and I kept riding together, climbing fast and occasionally passing people. The occasionally part of this disconcerted me at first. This climb is usually where I pass dozens of racers, and then I figured it out. I wasn't passing as many racers because at this time I was up where there weren't a lot of racers to pass. I was already with people who were every bit as strong of climbers as I am. I did my best to stop finding reasons to freak out over nothing. I was now at the part of the race I dread above all others, the powerline descent. When you're a mediocre descender on the Leadville 100 powerline descent, you are acutely aware of 4 things as you descend. 1, you are not going very fast. 2, lots of people are passing you. 3, there are many bikes with flat tires on the side of the road, acting as object lessons as to what could happen if you go any faster than you are currently going. And 4, your hands are going numb from pulling on the brake levers non-stop since you were 7 years old. I was nervous the whole way down and was grateful when I reached the bottom. I raced according to my plan for this descent, treated as one of 2 places in the race where time does not matter. Let people by when I could, hold my line when I needed to, and get to the bottom safe and ready to catch and slaughter those who had just passed me. And in fact, I reached the bottom safe, sound, and with legs that felt like they could and would do anything I asked of them. Powerline empties onto a few miles of pavement, followed by 15 miles of rolling dirt road, so I knew that very soon I'd be riding hard in a pace line. So I had a gel early, had a quick drink, and then looked down the road. There's a guy, I thought, riding solo. He'll be looking to start working. I spooled up, caught him, passed him, pointed at my back wheel, and ratcheted back my effort just a smidgen. My train was formed. Pulling him along, I hammered to catch another guy, then a group of 2. I had built a train of 5 just by pulling for a couple of minutes. Now it was my turn to put it to work. I pulled off left and drifted back, hoping the guys I was with knew what to do. The guy right behind me pulled through, then drifted back immediately. Then the next guy did, and so did the next guy. They knew. All 5 of us knew. I had stumbled into a Christmas miracle of a pace line. 4 complete strangers who either knew how to ride a pace line or were able to quickly figure it out by example. We flew along the pavement at a near obscene pace, getting to the right turn in what felt like were mere moments, closing in on a much larger group ahead of us. We caught them. They joined up, and that ruined the train. This new group hadn't been doing a fast, efficient rotation. Who knows what they had been doing? In fact, it was no wonder our group had swept them up. With the rotation messed up, the whole train fractured. Some racers shot ahead, others drifted back. I looked to grab a wheel of anyone who was going hard, made my choice, and joined up. As it turns out, that was Jason. We had agreed, as far back as the True Grit Epic last spring, that we should try to work together in the Leadville 100, and now we were getting that chance. "Let's do this," I whooped, feeling the intense joy of someone whose race is going impossibly well. I knew Jason's fast, faster than I am. Maybe this guy was going to be my ticket to a sub-hour race. We began quick rotations which kept up for the remaining couple minutes till we hit the dirt. I'm not sure what happened after that. Maybe someone got in front of Jason, holding him up. Maybe I was just feeling too good, racing out of my head. But I lost him before we got to the first meaningful checkpoint in the race, Pipeline. I looked at my GPS. I had done this first section in 1 hour 56. More or less exactly the amount of time it had taken me to get to this point in 2011, when I had finished the race in 8 hours and 18 minutes. Not exactly on track to do this race in sub-8. Which did not even occur to me a little bit. In fact, I just thought to myself, under 2 hours to the first checkpoint. In my own mind, thanks to a failure to correctly do year-to-year time comparison, I was doing awesome. Maybe Han Solo was right. Sometimes it's better to not know the odds. I blew through the first checkpoint, howling aloud. Dozens of spectators joined me in my cries. I was in full Happy Warrior race mode, and there was nothing I loved more than riding my bike. My spirits were high. My intensity was unlike anything I've ever felt in a race before. This may be because part of the course is what is normally called the flat part of the race. I put flat in sarcasm quotes because this is the elevation profile of this 15-mile section of dirt road, pavement, double track, and the course's only single track. While it is the flattest section of the course, and it clearly nets more descending than climbing in this direction, there's still 673 feet of climbing in 15 miles. This year, while I was heavier than I'd like to be, I was also stronger than I had ever been before. I could feel it. The work I did with Trainer Road that winter did some amazing things with what I could push out of my legs. I am an everlasting, hot-burning Roman freaking candle, I exulted to myself, which made a lot more sense to me at that moment than it does right now when I type it up. My point is, I felt pretty extraordinarily powerful. Maintaining momentum is a huge part of racing from the Pipeline to Twin Lakes. If you could convert downhills into forward motion during the uphills, you can be so much faster than otherwise. And for that reason, I was loving the Cannondale FSI Black. It tracked so beautifully on the descents. The lefty forks soaking up rocks and bumps, with the Envy M5050s giving me greater confidence than I'd ever had before. The Shimano XTR Di2 was making it ridiculously easy for me to go to the biggest gear, just hold down the button you've assigned to shifting up for a couple seconds, and pedal my brains out. Then I'd hit the corresponding uphill, keep pedaling till I started to bog a little, then shift one lighter, make a quick press of a button to lock out the fork, stand up, and go. By the time I was a third of the way through this section, I noticed we had caught and repassed most everyone who had dropped me during the Powerline descent, where my lack of skill overcame my bike's awesomeness, and I tiptoed down. By the time I got to where my crew had set up near Twin Lakes timing mat, I had fully eclipsed my previous bests on this 15-mile section. I had bettered my previous best in 2011, the last time I'd rode a geared bike, by nearly 2 minutes. I raced into the Twin Lakes crew corridor, looking for and finding without difficulty my crew, Lisa's brother Scott and his good friend Kara. By the night before, I had written them a detailed list of what I wanted at Twin Lakes 1. Ask if I wanted my arm warmers removed. Ask if I'd had a flat or other mechanicals. Remove both of my bottles. Note, I had finished the half bottle of half-strength CR333 I had started the race with, but had only drank half the bottle of water. Remove the empty gel packets from my center pocket. Add 6 new goo Roctane gels to my left pocket. Add a bottle of water to my front cage. A half bottle of half-strength CR333 in my rear cage. Place my hands in 4 goo electrolyte capsules and a bottle of water to wash them down and get ahead on hydration. Scott and Kara were amazing at executing this rather uptight list and had me rolling again within 15 seconds. Yes, no exaggeration, 15 seconds. Really, someone should video how efficient they are and how amazingly straight-faced they can be about taking my ridiculous sense of urgency so seriously. And now I was off to do the part of the race that looms large in most every rider's mind, the Columbine climb. As I got near the Columbine, nearing that 2.5-mile section where the air gets ridiculously thin and your legs suddenly have no power, I had a deja vu moment. I saw Ken Klober, the founder of the Leadville Trail 100, in the exact same place as I had seen him last year. "Good to see you, Ken," I shout, because it is. "Keep going," he yells. "Don't quit." "I will," I reply. "I'm having a good race." "Less talking, more riding," he shouts. I tell you, that man could be a professional heckler. I do more of the climb on my bike than I have ever done before, getting off only once because I feel the twinges of a cramp coming on and I want to head it off. I swallow half a dozen electrolyte capsules as I push my bike up to the end of the pitch. I'm doing an incredible job of managing my food, managing my drink, taking care of myself. I have, it seems, become an actual expert at racing this race. I'm getting to the top of the hard part of the Columbine climb. The last mile is easier. Almost flat, really. I near the turnaround point, the beginning of the second half of the race. And from many years of experience, I know the way I ride, I can more or less count on an almost dead even time split for my return trip, plus or minus 6 minutes. I haven't been looking at my computer for most of the climb. It's counterproductive. A good number might make me worry I'm going too hard. A bad number might demoralize me. But as I reach the turnaround point, I do look down. 4 hours, 4 minutes. I'm within the margin of error for a sub-8-hour finish at Leadville. It's not impossible. If I'm just a tiny bit faster on the second half of the race, a 7:59:59 may just happen. The blast of adrenaline I feel just about compensates for the near complete lack of oxygen at 12,600 feet. For the first time since I've begun doing this race, I do not stop at the Columbine aid station. I just hit the turnaround and keep going. "Don't you want some watermelon?" A volunteer, evidently aware of my racing tradition, calls out. "Too fast this year," I yell back. "No time for watermelon." The first thing you do in the big descent from Columbine Mine is climb. Sure, it's just for a quarter mile, maybe less, but it still seems just a little unkind, a little unfair. After that, though, it's all downhill for 7.5 miles. But you got to be careful because it's a double track width trail and other racers are going the other direction. And in my case, several racers who were going slower than I was on the way up were finding the new gravity situation much more to their liking and wanted to get by me. So, lots of people, lots of effort, very little oxygen. It's amazing, really, that most of us get up and down that section of trail without hurting each other. I do know that I was nearly brought to tears, and I am not exaggerating here, by the fact that so many people called out, "Go Fatty," to me as I rode down. Ben, the Hammer, Dave Thompson, Lindsay. And then I passed Ken again. This time he didn't heckle me, but yelled, "Good job, you're my hero." The man knows how to motivate people, what kind of motivation to use and when to use it. I breathed a sigh of relief. Passing Ken here meant that I had just made it past the technical 2.5 miles of descent. The rest would be easy. I had no cramps, I said aloud, happy I had made it through this big climb and descent without this common problem. Later, after the race, someone would approach me and say, "Why did you say no cramps, as you crossed paths with me during the race?" I didn't even try to explain. Friends kept yelling my name as I worked my way down the trail. Sometimes I'd recognize them in time to yell back, but more often I wouldn't. I'd still yell, but it would have to be something more generic like, "Yee-haw!" Meanwhile, I was starting to feel kind of weird. And I don't mean weird in the kind of weird I usually feel. No, this was a lightheaded, disconnected weird. I slowed down, recognizing that if I felt this way, my reflexes were probably not at their best. And then I self-assessed. Was I lightheaded because of altitude? Maybe, but I was lower now than I had been half an hour ago, and I felt fine then. Was I lightheaded because of lack of food? I didn't think so. I had been absolutely fastidious about my eating regimen. If I was riding hungry, this wouldn't be the first symptom. This would come after a grumbling stomach, a drop in power, and then an inability to get food down. I had none of those symptoms. I chose to ignore it, with the exception of being a smidgen more cautious than I already was on the descent, and hope it would go away. This, as it turned out, was a workable solution. In my case, I was never aware of the moment when I no longer felt dizzy. But eventually, before I got to the bottom of the Columbine descent, I was no longer dizzy. Still, I felt like I had been taking it slow, like I had come to an almost complete stop at the hairpin corners, which also seemed very loose and dusty that day. I felt like as I carefully eased my way down what was in fact the least technical descent of the day, the sub-8 dream was slipping away from me. Through the years, the Leadville 100 mountain bike race has grown and evolved. I have fun looking back to the early days of the race, 400 riders total, with me somewhere in the middle of the pack. But I also really love the current incarnation, 1,600 plus riders, with me being one of the lead 100 or so. One of the things I loved best this year was with so many riders, so spread out, I got to witness people racing and chasing their goals for the entirety of the descent down Columbine. So many people working so hard to show themselves what they can do, to test themselves. It's inspiring. I hit the bottom of the descent, stuck out my hand for Yuri Hauswald, Dirty Kansas 200 winner and awesome goo guy, to give me a quick 5, and charged forward. In my mind, the rest of the race would be easy. I felt like I had fouled this segment up by descending so cautiously, vowed to make up times from Twin Lakes to Pipeline. The strange thing is, though, my perception doesn't match reality. In truth, I had just done the descent from Columbine to Twin Lakes the second fastest I had ever done it, just a minute and a half slower than my best, and 2.5 minutes faster than in 2011, the year I had my fastest time at Leadville. I didn't have the data in front of me to let me know I shouldn't be beating myself up, though. All I had was urgency. I believed, to step my race up. I rode through the Twin Lakes aid station 4 hours 40 minutes into the race. This was, sadly, still about 15 minutes slower than my projected time if I wanted to finish in under 8 hours. I had several things, however, that kept me from falling into despair. First, my projected splits gave me a 10-minute cushion. They were, essentially, splits for a 7:50 finish. So while I was 15 minutes in arrears for a 7:50 finish, I was only 6 minutes in arrears for a 7:59 finish. 6 minutes can be recovered over 40 miles. Second, it's not like getting to the 60-mile mark in 4:40 is bad. Most years I've done this race, I'd still be working on getting to the Columbine Mine summit at this point, not back down and getting ready for the flattish run-up to the power line. Third, I had a backup time objective for this race, one that had come to me very recently, one I had instantly recognized as one I liked, and one I had, impulsively, gone rather public with. See, the Thursday before the race, Rebecca Rusch and I had gotten on stage at the historic Tabor Opera House to give our 10 best tips, read from our respective books, and talk about our first Leadville 100 race. As homework, I went back to Reba's book, Rush to Glory, which I highly recommend, by the way, and read about her first win in the Leadville 100. And there, on page 196, was her first winning finish time in the Leadville 100, 8:14. Interesting, was all that I thought at the time. And then, on stage, I introduced Reba as 4-time women's champion in the Leadville 100. She introduced me as a not-so-fast guy, which raised my hackles just a little bit. Then, when I mentioned I am a one-time single-speed champion, which I am pretty proud of, Reba countered with, "Yeah, but how many people were in your race category?" "There was a full podium and I was on top of it," is how I replied, because honestly I didn't know the answer. I just looked it up though, and the answer is 34. Coincidentally, the number of finishing women in the 40 to 49 age group in 2009, which is the category Reba raced and won, was also 34. Hackles, now at 100%. I decided at that moment that I had a new race objective, which I announced when Reba asked what I hoped to accomplish during the race this year. "This year, I'm going to finish with a time that's faster than what you won with the first time you raced the Leadville 100, I said. "How fast was that?" Reba asked. "Come hell or high water, I'm going to finish faster than 8 hours 14 minutes, I said. Reba said. "Good luck with that." And, returning back to the present, I was on track for that impulsive and hot-headedly stated goal. I was still on track to beat the 2009 version of Rebecca Rusch. That said, I had only done the easy 60-ish miles of the race. I still had the hard part ahead of me. I don't think I can overemphasize how incredible my crew was. As I pulled into the Twin Lakes aid station, Scott and Kara quickly swapped out my empty goo packets for new ones. They swapped out my empty bottles for a full one. They handed me 4 goo Roctane electrolyte capsules to swallow to keep cramps at bay. This left me free to notice some strange and awesome things. First, my friend Brad Keys was there. In fact, he was giving me a quick neck rub. And while I'm not a fan of neck rubs in general, if I'm going to get a neck rub from a guy, I want it to be Brad. "I'll see you again on Powerline," Brad said. "I'll have Coke and Skittles for you." Okay, I replied. Coke sounded great, but there was no human way I'd be able to chew Skittles while mouth-breathing my way up the power line. Next, I noticed my nephew Dallas and my niece Jessica and her whole family were all there. Since I thought Dallas lived in Hawaii, I was especially surprised to see him and even said, "What's up, Dallas?" "Just chilling," Dallas replied. Strangely, I did not notice my friend Frank W., even though he is roughly twice my height, and assures me he was standing right by me. I only became aware Frank was there when he let me know afterward on Facebook. Indeed, I still cannot remember seeing him nearby. Race brain is a strange thing. I noticed, and failed to notice, all of this in 10 or 15 seconds while I was there, and then I was gone again. As soon as I was back on the course, I noticed that hardly anything had changed. Somehow, I was still in this sea of racers all by myself, which meant that I was going to have to deal with a serious headwind. I think I've had a headwind on Twin Lakes to Pipeline section 16 of the 18 times I've done this race, all alone. But first, there was the quick uphill pavement I needed to contend with, which I did by pedaling. And second, I needed to contend with one suddenly obvious problem. Namely, that it was 11:15 in the morning, the day had warmed up, and I was still wearing my arm warmers. Luckily, that problem was easily solved. When a spectator on the side of the road hollered my name, I smiled, veered over as I stripped off my arm warmers, and tossed them to her. "Here, free arm warmers for you," I said, giving this poor woman what was most likely the stinkiest gift she had ever received. And then, unburdened, I continued up the road, alone. Oh, so very alone. I was really trying to find someone to work with, but I was never able to find a group. I just couldn't. There was one short train of 2 or 3 people up in the distance for most of this section, but I just couldn't quite bridge. Even so, I got to the pipeline aid station 5 hours and 39 minutes into the race, my second fastest time for this segment of the race. At this point, I was about 10 minutes ahead of my previous best, back in 2011 when I finished with a time of 8 hours, 18 minutes. But that year, I had been a lot lighter, and there were 3 biggish climbs ahead of me in this final 28 miles. My beat Reba's 2009 win goal was looking good. My sub-8 goal maybe wasn't looking quite as good, but still not impossible. But neither goal was a sure thing. It's strange to consider which parts of the Leadville Trail 100 I really look forward to, and which I really dread. I truly, in all honesty, look forward to what I consider the real crucible of the race, the powerline climb. I love how it's so intense, how it demands you give it everything you've got, how, once you've summited it, you know that the rest is going to be relatively easy. On the other hand, I dread the flat dirt road and pavement section between the pipeline and the beginning of the powerline climb, because you're guaranteed a headwind, and you're guaranteed to feel slow, beaten even. But this year, I was lucky on this flat section. I caught up with one rider, then another, and the three of us formed a train, taking turns giving each other a moment's rest from the wind. Then I turned off the pavement, forgetting to check my GPS to see what my mileage was, therefore ensuring I would not know how much of the 4-mile powerline climb I had done, and began the climb. A quick flat section leads to a moderate climb, leading to a quick hairpin, and then I was at the powerline march. Earlier in the week, in one of Reba's and my group rides, I had ridden this section without ever putting a foot down. In fact, it wasn't even really very difficult. Today, that was definitely not the case. Riding wasn't even a consideration. Halfway up, some of the good folks from Oakley, one of the event sponsors, were handing out little cans of Coke. The day had become hot, and the prospect of a Coke was glorious. I saw one of the Oakley guys dig into an ice chest and run toward me with a cold Coke. "Thank you," I began. And then he ran by me, handing the Coke to someone else. Or not, I concluded petulantly. But then he dashed back to his ice chest and dug out another Coke. "Keep going," he yelled. "I'll bring it to you." And he did. I was so happy, and I wanted that Coke so bad. When the Oakley guy handed it to me, I, for the only time during this race, stopped dead, planted my feet, and slugged the Coke down. I knew time was elapsing. I knew my average was dropping. I knew that I was, perhaps, eliminating my chance at beating my sub-8-hour goal and my beat 2009 Reba goal. In that moment, I did not care. This Coke was my whole world. I finished, tossed the can, and resumed my march. Then, about 50 feet later, I saw Carbo Rockets Brad, who, as he had promised, was handing out Coke and Skittles. I took a Coke from him, too. And if there had been someone another 50 feet up the trail also giving out Coke, I would have taken a Coke from them, too. Once I was past this hard 0.6 miles, I got back on my bike and promised myself I would not march again for the rest of the race. It was a good promise to make to myself, and one I kept. I began passing people, feeling like I was really moving fast. I was, as it turns out, wrong. Without realizing it, I was putting in the slowest climb of the power line I had done in years. It's very interesting to me to note that two of the three of my fastest times were on single speeds, including my fastest time back in 2013. Why was I so much slower? One word: wait. While my power was great, the power line cares a lot more about your power to weight ratio. I was packing too much pudge up the mountain. By the time I got to the summit of the power line climb, I was 6 hours, 49 minutes into my race. To get a sub-8, I'd have to do the rest of the race, including a rocky descent, a 3-mile paved climb, another descent, and a 2.2-mile climb to the finish line in an hour and 10 minutes. At that moment, I knew my dream of finishing a sub-8-hour Leadville was going to have to be postponed. If I want a sub-8, I've got to be this strong and at my lightest. It isn't good enough to be one or the other. But I told myself, if I give it everything I've got, I still have a shot at finishing under 8:14. I made up my mind there and then that I would not let that goal get away from me. I'm proud of the entirety of my race, but I'm especially proud of how I raced the final portion of it. Up 3 miles of pavement to the Carteret station, down St. Kevin's, to and up the boulevard. I gave it everything I've got. I did not leave anything on the course. While I wasn't the fastest I've ever been up the pavement to the Carteret station, power to weight thing again. From then on out, Strava shows nothing but personal bests. If I was going as hard as I could, and if Strava is to be believed, I had never gone this hard before. Soon after I had begun the boulevard climb, meaning I had about 3 miles left to go, 2.5 of which would be climbing, I heard my GPS chime. 8 hours. I had 13 minutes to do 2.5 miles of climbing. Could I do it? I didn't know. I wasn't in any state to do the math. Didn't remember how long it usually took me to get from this point to the finish line. I didn't know if I could do it, but I did know I could give it my best. So I turned myself inside out, just gutted myself, and I turned in the fastest boulevard time I have ever turned in, including the times when I just tore up the thing for fun, not on race day. In fact, I was a half-minute faster up the boulevard than my second best time. Those of you who have done the race multiple times before know that turning in a PR like this far into the race is not a small thing. I have a photo of me crossing the finish line. You can't see my face because my head is bowed, my body slumped. It's clearly the photo of someone who had just given the last of what he has to give. I kind of love this picture. I look exactly how I remember feeling. 8 hours, 12 minutes. At age 49, I had just gone the fastest I had ever done this race, beating my personal best by 6 minutes, in 19 starts and 18 finishes. I owed Rebecca Rusch a huge thank you. Without realizing it, she, or her 2009 time, had pushed me to go harder and faster than I had ever gone before, right up to the finish line.
All right, that's it for this episode. In Season 0, Episode 6, an interview with Leadville Trail 100 race founder Ken Klober. And what do you want to bet he's going to tell us to dig deep? I hope so. I need some of that. If you haven't yet subscribed, please head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts and do so. And be sure to leave us a 5-star rating and review. You see, in the early days of a podcast, doing so makes an enormous difference in whether other Leadville 100 racers and hopefuls can find us. For Fatty, I'm Hottie. Be sure to check back on Tuesdays for our regular show. As always, train well, race hard, and we'll see you at the finish line this August.